Well, we are back for another episode of Deals A to Z. We're doing seller financing as our topic. I've got my co-host Jeff Braylio with REI Mastery U, and our special guest today is Andy McFarland with Treehouse Investments. Thank you, Andy.
Total props.
Yeah. Now, Andy does a ton of stuff, and so I'm super excited because, I mean, this guy loans money, he does seller financing, he wholesales, he flips. I mean, he's just educator, speaker.
Highly experienced real estate investor. We're lucky to have him on our program.
Totally.
You guys are so kind. You don't need the flowery words. I've known Jeff and Yoshi for so many years. In fact, I used to have a channel, a YouTube channel. I love real estate stories.
Yes.
I haven't done a video in like 3 or 4 years, but one of the first people that I did an interview with was Yoshi Shiraki. You probably remember that, Yoshi.
Of course I do. Yes, thank you. It's so much fun.
Yeah, and Jeff, I mean, I've known Jeff for over years too. He's helped with transactions.
It's all about, helping each other. And that's what we're all about.
Yeah. And Jeff, you've helped me with a number of docs for like hard money lending and stuff like that. But I remember I did my IRA LLC. I think you helped me set that up too. It was cool.
Yeah.
Cool.
Which is self-direction, another great topic.
Yep.
So we'll have to
still using that, still doing that. So thank you for that.
Good. So am I.
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah.
Well, Andy, if you could take a minute just to tell us a little bit about yourself, because you are so experienced in so many different realms. Do you mind just sharing a little bit?
Oh man, it's tough with an intro like that. So I'll give you a little bit of a background. So Army brat, born and raised. I was born in Georgia, raised kind of across the United States, but I was the only kind of entrepreneur in my family. I never knew what I wanted to be when I grew up. Somebody handed me a book when I was 21 years old called Rich Dad Poor Dad. Some of you have heard of it. And that kind of got me, my mind started about like, oh, I don't have to figure out what I'm going to do when I grow up. I just need to make money. Like that was really my realization. Like you just have to make money and you're going to be fine, right? So that was it. That was like my first thing. And they talk a lot about real estate in that. So in 2003, I bought my first property and I called it my tree house because I'd never like built a tree house when I was growing up. It was like my first like opportunity to like first property, I had to do everything myself because I had no money. So that was my tree house, right? And with that tree house, interesting enough, I don't think I'm going to talk about that deal today, but the deal is I bought it as an illegal, non-conforming, bank-owned triplex, right? That's just a start. And this is my first deal, guys. I had no idea about any of this stuff. And I'm like, this shouldn't be a big deal. I mean, I think it was hammered, right? And it was in downtown Salt Lake City. And I bought it, fixed it, fixed it, rented it, sold it on owner financing, and then ultimately got cashed out. So that was my first deal, which it was looking back, it was one of my hardest deals in hindsight, but I learned so many things because you learn by doing. I learned by doing, and by having to go through all those different things, I learned a lot by doing that. So I don't know that I'll talk about that deal today, but that was my first deal. And since then, since 2003, I've been doing stuff in varying degrees, been doing real estate since then. And right now I've got a team of people who help me do it. We buy, my primary business is buying and selling properties in Utah, New Mexico, and Indiana. And a lot of that happens with owner financing. So I know we're going to talk about one specific deal today that you guys want to talk about, but I can tell you guys and your listeners that like seller financing is a pretty regular part of what we do when we're buying properties from sellers. Some simple seller financing like subject to, where we just step into their existing terms just to do a short-term deal. We're going to flip a property or even sell a property if somebody wants to flip it. We do that frequently. I was looking before we came on here. We've got like 16 houses, flips kind of going on in some varied form, and 5 of them have seller financing on them right now. So then that's just like, it shows you maybe 30% of our stuff that we do has some form of just basic, some basic seller financing, right? Keeping the seller's financing in place for short term.
Very cool. Awesome. Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing that. So
yeah, no problem.
Yeah, that was fantastic. If you don't mind, let's dive into the deal that we'll talk about. If you can share with us how you found the deal.
Yeah. So this deal, and this was back when I was primarily working with most of the sellers myself. So it's fresh on my mind, right? I think I'm pretty sure he called me from a postcard. And the guy's name was John. I went there and met him. He was a tired landlord, and his last tenant was one of his relatives. You guys have heard this story a lot before, right? Like the relative's not paying rent anymore, right? So he was tired. The relative kind of tore up the property. But he bought this property years prior. He used to live there. Then he moved out, and then like 30 years transpired. So he's talking like 40 years of property ownership. So he bought this thing for like 20 grand, and now it's trash, but it's still worth a lot more than that. And the price we're talking about was like, $80,000 to $100,000, right? So I came in there and I talked to him about it. And from talking to him, and when I'm working with seller financing, maybe we can dig into this more later. I don't like to go in there and say like, here's what I'm trying to do. Yeah. I like to go in there and just listen. and just say, what are you trying to do? What's your goals? Because it doesn't matter what I want. It matters what they're trying to accomplish. And from listening to him, I realized that he didn't need the money necessarily. He just wanted kind of an income stream. He liked it when his property was rented and he was actually getting his rent. He just liked those checks every month. He just liked those checks every month. And since he had he had a really low basis, meaning he bought the property for really inexpensive and he depreciated it all out. And he really, this sale from a $20,000 purchase to whatever I sell him, he's going to have a big taxable gain, and he's retired. So he's on Social Security. So this is going to pose a problem for him potentially tax-wise, right? So after listening to him and understanding, I proposed to him, I said, look, if you don't necessarily need all your cash now, what if I just make you monthly payments and you're able to kind of have a better situation tax-wise? And he was like, is that possible? And I said, yeah. I said, don't totally take my word for it. Obviously talk to your tax professional, but I think there's an opportunity here where you can, not have to pay taxes on all this stuff right now, and also not have your Social Security income be taxable, because that would be horrible, right? Double taxation at its worst. You paid into Social Security your whole life, you're receiving monthly stipend from it, and then you do something in your life to cause more money to come in, like selling a house, and now you have to pay taxes on your other income that was previously untaxable, right? So he kind of liked that idea, and we talked about it a little bit, and ultimately he ended up selling me that house for $90,000 on an installment sale. So there was no underlying mortgage. So we created our own new Norton mortgage, an installment sale, which means he didn't have to pay. Go ahead.
Installment sale versus a note and deed. Those are actually two different transactions.
Educate us here. I might be misusing the terminology.
Yeah, an installment sale is actually a contract for deed.
Okay.
Very similar to a car loan, where the seller maintains title, the buyer makes payment, and then upon the last payment or the completion of the contract, then the buyer finally takes title and owns the house.
So I'm using installment sale per the IRS's terms. So the IRS talks about if you sell a property and receive any of those payments in a different tax year, over tax year, it's just in a different tax year. So if you receive a payment in January or a December and one in January, it's really just 2 months, but it'd be 2 tax years. The IRS just defines and says if you sell something and receive it in payments that go across different years, then they call that an installment sale.
Right.
So I was talking about utilizing that for him.
Yeah, that's more of a real estate investing structural term.
Right.
When so installment sales, it usually refers to land contracts, whereas note deed is what you're talking about, where you just created a deed mortgage and the seller became the lender.
So we did a note and deed, seller became the lender. He utilized, per the IRS's terms, an installment sale, which is important for people that have a depreciated basis that don't want to have to pay a ton of taxes. So he liked that. So we created our own note and deed because there was no underlying mortgage, which means that we can talk about whatever terms we wanted to talk about. And he was happy with the $90,000. It was a $90,000 purchase, no money down. He didn't need any money down, which was great.
It's great for you.
4% interest and a 30-year fixed. It made sense to him. It made sense to him. And I'm like, great. And it was good for him. He gets like $450 or something a month. It was wonderful. And I bought his house, but that's normal, right? All this stuff I'm talking about was, Andy, you listen to the seller. He had a tax problem. This way he has his cake and eats it too a little bit, less of a tax burden, spread it out over time, which is great, right? But here's where it gets kind of interesting. I explained to him, I said, look, you don't want to have this tax burden come upon you unnecessarily. He said, no, I don't want to. I like this income stream. I want to keep this going. I said, okay, well, if I had to sell this property for whatever reason, then you would have to get paid off because you're attached to it. I gave you that security. You should have that security. I recommend people get the security. And I said, that would pose a problem for you because I'd sell the property and you'd have to get paid off. And we don't necessarily want to have to do that. And he's like, no. And so I said, okay, well, what if we could find a way to not do that, to not have to pay you off that way that we could. And he was like, well, could we do that? And I said, yeah. So I introduced him that way. What you guys all know about is like a substitution collateral or a walkable mortgage, right?
Yes.
So I introduced it to him that way. It was all about his benefit. It was not about me saying, would you, do this stuff for me? It was for him because he really does want the income stream. So I introduced that to him. I didn't say walkable mortgage. I didn't say substitution collateral. I just said, what if we find a way to do this? They don't know. And he said, well, that would be great. And I said, look, and here's what we would do. If we were ever going to move this to another piece of collateral, because you should definitely have collateral always, we would just make sure that collateral was approved by you and it was always worth more than what I owed you. And he said, that's wonderful. Let's do that. So we did that. And then I also asked him to at the same time, I said, look, I know you know me and I know you, and it's great talking to you, John. He said, yeah, I appreciate this. I said, if for whatever reason in the future, and I know you're a healthy guy, but you're getting on in years, if for whatever reason something happened where where you needed to sell this, or if you, heaven forbid, you passed away and your heirs got this and they did something and sold it to somebody else, I said, I would just love the opportunity to know about it first and have an opportunity to buy it. Would that be okay? And he said, well, what do you mean? I'm like, because I make payments to you, $450 a month. And I would hate to have somebody call me someday and say, hey, my name's Ted and I own this note now and you owe me $450 a month. I mean, that would be shocking to me a little bit. And I mean, I'd have to pay Ted, of course, but I'd love the opportunity if you were going to work with anybody else, if you just give me an opportunity to work with you and match that. And he said, well, that makes perfect sense. So what I did there was work in a first right of refusal to purchase that note if it was ever going to be sold or transferred to anybody else. Does that make sense? And he totally agreed with that because it makes total sense, right? So I got that first right of refusal in place just in case. But what I did was I had that property, his property that I bought, that this mortgage was attached to, or this trust deed was attached to. I didn't really love that property for a long-term hold because it just wasn't conducive. You guys know, your properties are just like, I don't want to hold that on kind of a busy street. It just wasn't conducive. And I was going to have to put a lot of money into it to flip it or to rent it. And I just didn't want to have that much money into it. So what I did was I had another property that was a rental property of mine. It was a long-term hold. So what I did was when I bought the property, I put his loan, that trust deed, actually put it on one of my rental properties. So I, in essence, refinanced him with that purchase. So I initially put that $90,000 loan on one of my other rental properties that I was going to keep long-term, right? So I put it over there. So then I owned his house free and clear. Then I just fixed it up. I probably put $25,000 or $30,000 to it, fixed it up, sold it for a flip profit, which was great. Okay. And that deal worked in and of itself. And then I had the $90,000, which he sold via that, I don't want to say installment sale because you're going to think, there was tax advantage for him in that sale. And now I'm making payments to him and he's tied into one of my rental properties that he loved and he kept long-term, which was great. It's been great for him and great for me. Well, another twist of that came, I'm not going to give you the details of this other seller financing deal I got, but I got this other seller financing deal, which was pretty good. And ultimately that house that I put him on that was a rental, I wanted to sell that one too, because over the years, a tenant trashed it and I'm just like, I just want to sell this and appreciate it. But I had his $90,000 loan on the first position. So I took that again and I moved it again to another rental property that I had because, why not, right? So I basically refinanced these other things with his walkable mortgage or substitution of collateral. And he's extremely happy to this day. I'm still happy to pay him. I visit him every once a year or so and we catch up. And there you go. I'm gonna pick it apart.
Yeah, actually, I want to go back first. Finding the deal, you said he probably called you on a postcard or flyer, and I know you do quite a bit of sort of direct mail marketing, correct?
Yeah.
How much money do you spend on direct mail marketing?
Per month, probably $40,000, maybe.
Yeah. So, and do you pretty much find all your own deals? You rarely go out to wholesalers or other people to find deals. You pretty much, your marketing brings you your deals.
Yeah, my marketing brings me my deals. I can wholesale deals to other investors because I kind of have an excess of deals because I do a lot of marketing.
So much, right.
Yeah, I do a lot of marketing.
Do you do any other kind of marketing other than the direct mail?
Yes. Yeah, a lot of it. So a lot of online methods too. So we utilize some Facebook now. We do Google pay-per-click, some Bing pay-per-click. SEO, so we've tried working to try to get our organic rankings up. We experiment with some of those other things people do, like some of the text message marketing and things like that. We experimented with that. But a lot of it's, online methods and direct mail, still a lot of that.
Cool. And then the other thing that I really liked at the beginning of what you were saying is you went in there not seeking your own goals,
right?
But listening to him to see what he needed. And we hear this a lot in almost everyone we interview. It's solving the seller's problems.
Yep.
Right. And his problem in this case was he had owned a home outright that if he just sold, he would have been stuck with a major capital gains tax.
Yep.
Which he was trying to avoid. And so selling on terms under a note and deed spreads that out over time and really reduces his tax burden. So he came in and solved a problem, and that was awesome. And then the wrinkle, which I love, and that's more of a deep, more advanced, is that walking the mortgage.
Yeah.
Which a lot of investors don't really understand, because when you find a guy there's no mortgage on the property, and he's willing to give you, essentially, he's giving you $90,000.
Yeah.
At 4%.
It's a sacred trust. It's a sacred trust. Yeah.
And for 30 years.
Yeah, for 30 years.
No 5-year balloon, 10-year balloon, which is more common, but 30 years. That means you've got essentially a hard money loan for 30 years at 4%.
Yeah. And with a substitution of collateral, which I can move it.
Just keep it going.
Yeah, because as you guys both know, most mortgages loans, they last about 7 years because people will sell or refinance.
Right.
Yeah. So it typically,
And
they're
sometimes sellers are really nervous about being in a 30-year relationship with some investor who called, maybe called them on the phone.
And that's a good point you make there too. And John's an older guy. He knows he's not going to be around for those 30-year term.
Yeah.
So, and he might have asked me at that time, I don't know if it was him or other people, because I've had this question asked me a lot. And they kind of chuckle and say, well, Andy, I'm not going to be around. I hope I am, but I'm 70 and 30 years is a long time. And typically I'll have a conversation with them at that point and say, well, what are your goals? If you were to pass away, who is going to be inheriting this estate? And sometimes they'll say, well, my sons, my daughters, these people. And I said, are all of them just straight arrow down the line, just responsible with money? And inevitably there's one black sheep in the family, or two or three, or all of them. They're like, well, little Timmy, he's not that great with money. And I say, well, would you think it would be a good thing in Timmy's life if you dropped $40,000 on him? Well, no, that wouldn't be good for Timmy. Well, how wonderful it is that you would have a way that he would receive reliable income every month for a long time. And he'd think he'd be every month when he got that check, I'm sure, but it's not enough money that's going to be a detriment to his life. He's not going to be able to go out and do some, people can go out and, they can spend the windfall. And maybe even if they are responsible, this gives them that longevity of it. And a lot of times people will say, well, that makes sense. That makes sense to me.
Did you do anything with him to facilitate what happens when he dies? Like, who's the name lender on the note? Is it him?
It's him. He's the named lender.
So if he dies,
then he's going to have heirs, and whoever's his thing, they're going to have to go through, and it's going to be there.
They're going to have to go through probate.
Yeah.
And deal with it with all the heirs and the kids squabbling and maybe saying, hey, we don't understand what this is. We want it paid off. We want our cash now. Because heirs always want money now.
Yeah. And when they do that, luckily written into that very simple note we have there is that first right of refusal. So they'd get to talk to me and I'd at least be involved in the conversation. Right. I'd like to be involved in the conversation. That's it.
You talked to him about setting up some kind of family trust.
I don't actually, that one isn't his personal name, but I don't know if he has any estate planning like that. I haven't tried to dig into that deeply.
Something that I would recommend, especially when you're doing seller financing with older people who may not live for as long as the term of the note. And you got a 30-year note and he's 70. Yeah. So almost certainly he's not going to last the full 30 years.
He won't.
If you help them, you can help them set up a very simple family trust. Name the trust as the lender. And the trust can dictate that this note has to stay for the full term. And then you just make payments to the trust, which would then go to the heirs, who he lists. Yeah. It can control who gets that and when. And not have to worry about his nephew or son or grandson that's going to spend all the money on drugs or whatever it happens to be.
Well, that $450 a month, if his 1/8 of the $450 a month, he can spend it on whatever he wants. Now, if his heir decides that he would like to have cash now, absolutely, that's a conversation we can have. And they can't sell it to anybody else without consulting with me about it. So whether or not he has a living trust or not,
you're fine.
I think I'm okay with it. And I don't know who his heirs are, and I didn't dig into it that much. But the idea being that I'd be fair to him at the time. I just want to make sure that I want to involve that conversation because I'd hate to see him inherit something that was worth $70,000 and sell it to somebody for $30,000 without consulting. Because I might have been able to find the $30,000. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Maybe.
Yeah. So Andy, you refinanced a loan with this loan.
Yes.
Was that other loan just a traditional bank loan, or was that another seller finance loan that you got with a better interest rate?
That other loan was actually a friend of mine who had a self-directed IRA. I believe I was paying him 10% because it was kind of a short-term deal. I bought it, fixed this house up, and was renting it. And I just kind of left that in place. And I think he was owed like 100 or something like that. So then I moved the 90 there and I paid the extra 10 out of pocket. So I think the day before we did the closing, I paid off my friend. And so I owned it free and clear. And the title company was obviously involved in all this stuff. So I paid it off, so I owned it free and clear for a day. And then they came on. So that was it.
That's very cool. So that other house was originally going to be a flip, but then you kept it as a rental?
Well, I was always keeping that as a rental. It was just I was fixing it up.
You're going to have to refinance out on that one.
Yeah, I was going to have to do something else with it. Yep, exactly. I was going to have to do something else. But I don't love traditional financing. And I guess for me, I just don't like when you go like a 30-year fixed now is 3%, unless you're an investor, and then it's like 4.5%. And by the way, you got to pay like $7,000 or $8,000 of junk fees. And it doesn't make sense to me. I just don't like that. So whenever I do long-term buy and hold stuff, I'll either put seller financing on it, move something there, or get some like subject to kind of seller financing when servicing somebody else's payments. or I'll just pay it off and get like an equity line so I can kind of have both of those. Right. I know that's not a conversation for today. We're doing seller financing, but
yeah, that's great. Yeah, you do a lot of seller financing deals, and with John on this deal, he was pretty agreeable to seller financing because he had a very specific problem that could be easily solved to provide him monthly income, which he wanted,
right,
and a big reduction in the capital gains tax, which he wanted.
Right.
So great situation. Have you had other seller financing deals where you're negotiating with sellers who may not be that agreeable, or maybe too scared to enter into this sort of lender relationship with you? And how did you overcome these sort of concerns that sellers might have in seller financing?
Yeah, all the time. Because you're doing this segment on seller financing, so people might be tempted to believe like, oh, this happens all the time. Andy always does seller financing deals. Absolutely not. I'd say seller financing is probably a tool that's used maybe 20-25% of the time, just because most of the time the sellers are not interested in that and it doesn't fit their needs. So even though we have these tools in our tool belt, it doesn't mean that we need to go in there with every seller and be like, I never would walk into a house and say, I'm going to get seller financing on this. I just wouldn't do that. I never make any assumptions. I like to come in every house, a blank slate, say, I've got a tool belt full of tools. What's going to be the best for the seller? And some of it might be it's not a fit. Some of it might be you need to do something that's totally different, Mr. Seller, because I'm not your best fit, right? It might be listing it with an agent or doing something else. But yeah, so less agreeable, certainly. But I would say that I don't ever go in there looking for something specifically. So I'm never there going and saying, well, then, it doesn't work. I just say, well, how can we make this work? What's the situation you need to work out? And they say, well, have you thought about this? Have you thought about that? I don't try to steer people into that. I try to just, what are you trying to accomplish? How can I best help you accomplish that? And here's the thing with seller financing. So I don't know if you want your listeners to have any tips, I know this isn't a trick, but I think the best thing you can do for any type of a deal, frankly, with life in general, with dealing with anybody, but any type of a deal, especially if you're trying to do seller financing, is go in there first with just big ears and listen. Just ask open-ended questions and things like, what are you trying to do here? What's your best case scenario? What's your end goal? What are you trying to accomplish with whatever you've got to say to get them to say, well, here's what we're trying to do. Then ask follow-up questions to try to really understand them. I think it's Stephen Covey that coined the thing, seek first to understand, then to be understood. If you do that, it's brilliant in two ways, because one, listening to people, you'll understand them. But two, for seller financing deals specifically, you have to be in rapport with somebody. There's a huge trust that is there. If they don't have trust with you, like why would they enter into any relationship, whether it be 3 months or 30 years? Why would they do it if they don't trust you? And they won't. But if you listen to somebody, that's the best possible way to build rapport. People think often they're like, oh, I'm going to build rapport. Somebody, Yoshi likes to cut hair, or he likes football. I'm going to talk, hey, I like football too, and I like getting haircuts. But really, while I'm saying that stuff, you might think, oh, I'm trying to like relate to him. It's not true. Nobody cares. When you're talking, you're connecting, right? So the person that's talking is connecting. So when I'm asking someone a question and I'm listening, it's twofold. While they're talking, I'm gathering information about what they need to do, and they're connecting to me. So that's building the rapport. So it gets me double win right there, right? Like it shows that I care, because I do. I'm able to understand what they're trying to do, so I can put something together. And then there's going to be a trust there, because we'll be in rapport, which will enable them to actually trust me to do what we say we're going to do. Because lots of people can say, well, I'm an expert, I can do these things, but they might not trust them. Especially in real estate, sometimes we come off bad, right? Sometimes sellers like, those guys are slimy. I don't want to ever be that way.
There are a lot of bad investors out there.
I mean, they're probably, and I hope I never come off like that to a seller. And maybe certainly I have in my life, and that's probably because I went in there and just thought, oh, I'll do what I want. I hope I always treat every situation, even if I've done it 1,000 times, as I've never talked to you before, Mr. Seller. And although I can tell you, I wrote the book on this. Doesn't matter. They want to know that I listened to them tell me exactly how their son trashed the house. And I can be like, wow, how must that feel? Instead of saying, yeah, it happens all the time. I deal with this all the time. I bought a house down the street. I did this now. They don't care.
Yeah.
They don't care.
Yeah, you don't get an up-and-ship of knowing more than they do.
Never.
Yes.
Never.
Oh, yeah, exactly. You don't say, I experience that all the time. I get you. No. Just let them emote. Let them talk. And that gets stuff off their chest. Yes. That they probably have wanted to complain to somebody about.
Absolutely.
The family that's ruining their property.
Absolutely.
They can't complain to family, so they now have this opportunity to just let their emotions go, and that takes their guard down. And then, if you're a good, solid, honest investor, you can find terms that are going to work with that seller.
You probably can. And some of it might be, you're not going to force terms. Maybe they do need cash, and that's okay. Or maybe They've got all the time in the world. The house is beautiful. And you think like, you don't need me. I've told that to sellers before, like, you don't need me.
Are you an agent, or anyone on your team as an agent? I don't remember.
There are people on the team that are, I'm not.
So do you always offer maybe listing as an alternative, one of the tools in your tool belt, if purchasing or seller financing won't work, say, hey, well, we can also list it? Is that just one of the...
I always ask, not that I can list it for them, and I hope that members of my team, I've talked to them about that, and I'm not involved in every conversation, but I hope that they always ask that question, because it's a great open-ended question to them. Hey, why don't you list the property? Tell me have you considered that, right? Because they'll tell you, it's not that they haven't thought of it. It's not that they haven't thought of it. Most of the time they don't for whatever reason. They'll say, well, yeah, fill in the blank. You're like, okay.
And there's usually a very specific reason. There's usually a reason they don't want it listed.
Yep. And it's good to know that. It's always good to know going in.
That's right.
And even if you go in there and you listen to the seller and you're in rapport with them, and if you do nothing more, if you never accomplish any deals, you don't do any business, but you spend an hour there talking to them and just let them talk, just giving them that psychological air. In our society, when was the last time you actually had somebody listen to you for an hour? I mean, people pay $450. People pay $450 an hour for like psychiatrists, psychologists to listen to them, right? So as you go in there and do that, even if you can't put a deal together and they just were able to talk to you about it, and you could just say, hey, be some sort of good influence in their life, and if just to listen to them for an hour, even if it's not a fit, wow, what a gift you gave them, right? Because the non-renewable resource we're all dealing with, the most precious one is our time. And if you go give someone an hour of your time, wow, you gave them something. And at the end of that, they feel good because you listen to them, you understand them. Even if you didn't solve their problem. I mean, psychiatrists don't always solve people's problems. They just listen to them.
They just listen. Yeah.
Just listen.
Here's interesting, because I know Yoshi's had deals like this where he's negotiated with a seller, deal didn't work, wasn't a right fit, wasn't right timing, whatever, but just really made that connection. And then months or years later, the seller calls back.
Yeah.
Or provides a referral. Do you have any experience with, hey, the deal didn't work, but then because of that relationship with the seller, that something came out of it that you didn't expect?
Yeah. And back when I was working with sellers a lot, it doesn't happen all the time, right? Especially if you don't remember to follow up with them, because you can have a great rapport, but then the next guy comes in the door, they have good rapport too. But I have had a few instances from people that I bought houses from them multiple times, bought a few different houses from them. I bought this house and they called me back a year or so later because their moms died or whatever happened. They need something else. So that's probably happened to me about 4 times in my life, where there'll be somebody I've worked with before and we just have a relationship. And they're actually sellers to this day. And again, I'm not the guy working with sellers all the time anymore, but there's people to this day that I have friendships of people that I bought their house. Good. Like I can name names of people that I bought their house and it was cool. And it's cool to be able to help them, whether or not I profited from the transaction or not, right? And if you go in, I always try to go in that attitude. If I go in there and think like, I don't have to make something I don't have to make money off this person, and just go with that, they can tell the difference. You can tell when somebody's really trying to make a bunch of money on you, or if they're in there saying like, no, I want to see what's best for you. And when you go with that I'm best for you attitude, most of the time, I mean, they will trust you because they should, and then they'll let you help them. They'll let you help them with it, which is cool.
Yeah, something I've said, I think when we've done this in the seller financing set of stuff, almost in every program, is in every seller financing deal, it literally is a partnership with the seller. Yeah. And it could be a long-term partnership. You got the 30-year partnership with John. You need a good relationship because things do happen during that time. John might get sick and have huge medical bills and file for bankruptcy. Yeah. So you never know what's going to happen, or could just disappear. And then suddenly you're like, where do I make these payments? Yeah. So maintaining that relationship with the seller, establishing and maintaining the relationship, is going to do so much for making the long-term seller financing deal run smoothly.
Absolutely.
Because if they disappear on you, especially if there's an underlying mortgage, with John, there was no underlying mortgage. If there's an underlying mortgage and then suddenly they disappear, you could really find yourself stuck clearing it or getting contact with the bank, et cetera. So it's all about relationships. I think that was a great story to tell with John and the relationship you have with him, because that's where it's at.
Yeah. And I think that's for everything in life too, the relationships, because we're specifically talking about seller financing, but if more people sought first to understand and listen, then we wouldn't have as many problems in the world. And I think I'm as guilty of this as other people too. So I don't think I'm not an expert, but I think like if we would do that first, right? And then once you've listened to the people feel understood, now they're actually open to listening to what you have to say. Sorry, Yoshi, what were you going to say?
Oh, no, I love that, what you're sharing. I just had a question I hear a lot of new investors ask about seller financing. So I'm curious to see how many times you've run into it, having done so many deals, is the due on sale clause. Have you ever run into that being a hiccup in any of your transactions?
Yeah, I've had it called a couple of different times. And it's not really a big deal. It's one of those things that you guys probably tip people all the time. They're written into every loan, almost every loan. And it's the lender's right. It's not their obligation to do so. They can call it if they'd like to, if it makes sense for them, if that's their business. If they choose to do that as a business practice, to call it due, they can do that. And then you'll get a letter. I don't know if you want to know specifics, but for me, the one I remember is I got a letter and the lender said, hey, we noticed the title had transferred. You need to do one of three things: put it back into their name, pay it off, or refinance, pay it off, or whatever. And they sent me that. And they said, if you don't do one of these within 60 or 90 days, we're going to initiate a foreclosure or do a notice of default.
Yeah.
Okay. So, I mean, I had that time. Like, okay, I'll do it. And I ended up finishing up the flip and just selling it. And it was a non-issue, right? Because I had it sold.
Because you're experienced, the key to that is just having the exit strategy.
Yeah.
Good.
You can always, either selling it or you refinance it or you've got a hard money or private money, whatever to do it. Yeah. So I never look at it as, maybe people are scared of that. I never look at it as a scary thing.
Right.
Most experienced investors don't look at it as a scary thing.
Yeah. And it doesn't happen often.
Exactly. Yeah. That's the point.
It doesn't happen often. The reason my mind happened was because I took over the property subject to this mortgage that was there, but he was behind like 6 months. So when I did that at the closing, of course, all that arrearage, we wrote a check. So they got like a $20,000 check to catch everything up. Well, that triggered them to be like, what's going on here? And that's why they looked into it, saw the title transfer. That was the only reason.
Got it.
Other times it's been like
they do teach ways to avoid that specific red flag.
Yeah, and you can. There's ways to do that. But it wasn't a big deal.
Introducing the red flags to the bank, and most likely they're never going to find out.
Yeah, and it wasn't a big deal. It wasn't a big deal. There was nobody went to jail. This was not not a felony. There's none of that. It's just a lender saying, we decided we don't want to receive payments on this and we want our payment now. Okay. Yeah. Exactly. We'll take care of it.
Awesome. Any final tip, Andy? Final words of advice?
I would just say that if people come away with this in all aspects of life, if we all just seek to understand first and listen to people, life would just feel so much better. There's turmoil going on in the world. There always has been. But I think that would be true in that situation too. If we'd all just look across the table and say, help me understand what you're thinking here.
Yeah. And listen, just open the ears and shut the mouth.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep. Absolutely.
All around.
I love it. I love it. Andy, thank you so much for sharing so much wisdom, so much advice. That was a great story as well. I really enjoyed hearing about John, and so thank you so much.
Yeah, well, I appreciate you guys. Thanks for thinking of me. Thanks for having me on. Kind words at the beginning, always.
Great.
Absolutely.
Next time.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that's another episode of Deals A to Z with Jeff Brailio and Andy McFarland and myself, Yoshi Shiraki. I hope everybody enjoys the rest of their day.